Hey, what's going on everybody? Diptesh here. Welcome back to the channel. So, the highly anticipated video of the gaming performance of the Lenovo LOQ with the Intel Core i5-12450HX and the RTX 4060 is finally here, and I'm 100% sure that this video will clear all of your doubts and questions. But before that, if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. This is not a sponsored channel. This review that I'm doing, I purchased this laptop with my own money to maintain complete independence. This is not an easy thing to do for a small channel like me. So please consider supporting the channel. If you wish to purchase any of these laptops, please consider purchasing it from the affiliate links down in the description. When you purchase from those links, I get a small commission without any extra cost to you, and that is what helps this channel to stay alive. Also, please consider joining our Telegram community to engage in tech discussions and get alerted on the best tech deals the earliest. With that said guys, let's get right into it. First of all, a quick talk about the CPU, the Intel Core i5-12450HX. I'm not going to make a dedicated separate video covering the CPU and its performance because the i5-12450HX is exactly same as the Intel Core i5-12450H and almost the same as the Intel Core i5-13420H. All of these CPUs are 4P cores and 4E core parts, and they only differed very slightly with clock speeds. I have covered the Intel Core i5-13420H in details in my Acer Nitro V CPU performance review, so I'm going to point you to that video if you wish to know more about the CPU and its performance. It's identical basically. For a quick performance check, here are Cinebench R23 numbers, both single core and multi-core, and also Geekbench 6 numbers, both single core and multi-core. Basically, it's almost identical to the Intel Core i5-13420H, basically margin of error. However, do note, the main advantage of the Intel Core i5-12450HX over the 1250H and any other H series CPU is that this being an HX CPU is officially unlocked to support undervolting. Undervolting is a game changer for the CPU because it has huge upsides and advantages in terms of efficiency, thermals, and performance. So I'm not going to demonstrate the undervolting in details in this video. I'm going to show a brief demonstration later on in the video, but do note, I'll make sure that I have a dedicated undervolting guide and the benefits of undervolting in a separate video later on. So stay tuned for that. Alright, before going into the GPU benchmarks, here's a deep dive into the thermal performance of the Lenovo LOQ. The LOQ comes with Lenovo Vantage, which has different performance profiles which control your CPU and GPU power draw and fan curve. You've got quiet mode, balanced mode, balance plus AI mode, performance mode, extreme mode, and a custom mode. The most important in my opinion is the custom mode. It gives you full access to create a custom fan curve, or you can enable maximum fans. Inside you can customize your CPU TDP depending on your preference of thermals and performance. You can also change your CPU thermal throttling limit. Similarly, you can change your GPU TGP, dynamic boost settings, and GPU thermal throttling limit based on your preference. For this test, I will keep all the settings as default. You can also apply GPU overclocking alongside custom mode. These settings work the best for me. However, for this test, I will keep it off as by default it's disabled. Since the various performance profiles in Lenovo Vantage affects both the CPU and the GPU, I have devised my own way to test for thermals. This is an area in Cyberpunk 2077 which is both CPU and GPU demanding, as you can see from the CPU and GPU usage. I am testing at 1080p ultra settings without DLSS and RT. I will loop around the block for around 20 minutes in each of the 6 performance modes plus one more mode which I created on my own and show the temperatures and overall performance. This will give you a very accurate report of the performance and temperatures for each of these modes. Finally, it's important to state that these tests have been conducted under extremely hot 38 degrees centigrade weather inside a room that has no entry for fresh cold air and there is no AC. In fact, it's so hot that it's like lube blowing through the rooms, and doing these tests have actually taken a toll on my body. It is extremely hot. The only thing that is in my room is just a ceiling fan which is just blowing hot air, and the only thing that I've done is raise the back of the laptop to clear more room for improved airflow. Alright, keep an eye on the CPU and GPU power limits. Starting with quiet mode, the fans are as quiet as possible, and this mode really shows the efficiency benefits of RTX 4060. CPU and GPU temperatures in the mid 70s and 50 FPS average without DLSS. Next we got balanced and balance plus AI. CPU and GPU combined take up about 115 watts, with the GPU up to 80 watts, and the fans are slightly more aggressive. On average, the CPU and GPU temperatures are both just shy of 80 degrees centigrade. Remember, the ambient temperatures are very high, around 39 degrees centigrade, so remember that. Average FPS is around 25% better with balanced mode at 62 FPS, while balanced plus AI is around 64 FPS. Moving on to performance mode, where CPU and GPU combined goes up to 135 watt, with temperatures reaching around 83 degrees centigrade for both the CPU and the GPU. The performance is identical to balanced plus AI mode in this game, but do note in other GPU bound games you will get better performance, as in this performance mode the GPU reaches up to 100 watt. Next we got extreme mode, where CPU and GPU both combined can go up to 165 watt with up to 115 watt for the GPU. I personally don't like this mode at all, as this pushes way too much power without much benefit, while temperatures reach 95 degrees centigrade for the CPU and 86 degrees centigrade for the GPU. Basically both CPU and GPU touch thermal throttling at certain points. Average FPS is around a nice 69 FPS. Next we got custom mode plus maximum fans, where I am using the default settings, according to which we are at around 150 watt of combined CPU GPU power, with the GPU going up to 110 watts. Temperatures are much better than extreme mode, with CPU in the 85 degrees centigrade range and the GPU at maximum 83 degrees centigrade. Performance is almost as good as extreme mode at 68 FPS. Finally, I want to show you a quick profile that I made on my own. Basically, I undervolted the CPU and I undervolted plus overclocked the GPU. Now do note, this is a quick and dirty overclocking and undervolting. I can make it much better if I work on it. This is just for a quick demonstration purpose of the benefits of undervolting. Just look at how much of a difference it makes. Compared to balance plus AI mode, which gave us the best performance to temperature ratio, notice that using my undervolted profile, we are pulling more power for both CPU and the GPU with better clock speeds. And yet the temperatures are similar, if not better, which means we still have more headroom to perform better in more demanding scenarios than this. We also have slightly better average, better 1% and 0.1% lows. Compared to extreme mode, my custom settings are so much better in terms of thermals. We take a slight hit to the average FPS, but we have better stability in terms of 1% and 0.1% lows. So that was all about the thermal performance of the Lenovo LOQ. Do remember again, it was done under extremely hot weather inside a hot room back to back. So yeah, keep that in mind. In my opinion, if you are a beginner, I would recommend you to stick with balance plus AI mode. Or otherwise, I would recommend you to create a custom profile where you can set your custom fans or set the fans to maximum and undervolt your CPU using throttle stop and undervolt plus overclock your GPU using MSI afterburner, because that will give you the best balance of thermals and performance easily. Like I said earlier, a dedicated video on undervolting will be coming soon. Alright, so finally let's move on to the gaming benchmarks. Do keep an eye on the CPU and the GPU utilization, because that will help you understand which games are more CPU bound, which games are more GPU bound. A lot of people ask the same question regarding the CPU bottleneck because of the i5 processor. So keep an eye on the CPU and GPU usage and I'm sure you will understand yourself. All the benchmarks are recorded using the supplied 170 watt power adapter, using manual mode with maximum fans and this basic overclock applied using Lenovo Vantage itself. So the first game is Cyberpunk 2077 using the built-in benchmark at 1080p ultra settings, no DLSS, no RT. The Lenovo LOQ with the 12450HX RTX 4060 manages 80 FPS on average. Comparing this with the much more expensive i7-13700HX RTX 4060 Helios Neo 16, which also manages the exact same 80 FPS in this benchmark. While the i5-13420H RTX 4050 Nitro V manages to get 68 FPS. So CPU bottleneck anyone? Okay, here's a bit of an actual gameplay. Sorry for no audio because I don't have a capture card yet. Shooting these gameplay segments was a real pain. Next up is Red Dead Redemption 2 built-in benchmark using these settings at 1080p. The Lenovo LOQ manages a good 76 FPS in this benchmark. The Asus TUF F15 with a much faster 6P core i7-12700H manages around 80 FPS. So the much faster CPU in this game does make a 5% improvement, while the RTX 4050 Nitro V manages 63 FPS. Next up is Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p highest preset, and the i5-12450HX RTX 4060 lock really surprised me as it managed a whopping 137 FPS. The much more expensive Helios Neo 16 with the much faster i7-13700HX RTX 4060 managed only 4% better with 143 FPS. This laptop was nearly double the cost of the lock. The Nitro V RTX 4050 managed 107 FPS. Alright, let's take a quick look into a couple of esports games, starting with CS2 at medium settings and at very high settings. Now these esports games simply depend on a couple of cores and rely heavily on clock speeds, and this is where having a processor which can clock higher will get you more FPS. Expect around 180 FPS in medium settings and 165 FPS at very high settings. I also have a benchmark with screen recording using the same medium settings where I averaged 175 FPS. CS2 is definitely a lot more demanding than CSGO. Moving on to Apex Legends, and I was not sure why my FPS was capped to 138 FPS. Later on I searched a bit and I was able to unlock the FPS using this launch command. However, I only have screen recorded benchmark for this, so using these default settings, the lock was able to average a very smooth 200 FPS. Expect 10 more FPS without screen recording. Again, a higher clocked CPU will fetch higher FPS in this game. Alright, coming back to the remaining AAA games, we got Spiderman Re-mastered. At 1080p very high settings, we get an average of 126 FPS with 1% lows of 79 FPS, and at high settings we get an average of 121 FPS with a 1% low of 68 FPS. Compared to the 4050 Nitro V, the RTX 4060 lock is 27% faster at very high settings and 20% faster at high settings. Next up is God of War. At 1080p ultra settings, the 4060 lock is 33% faster than the 4050 Nitro V, and at high settings the 4060 lock is 35% faster than the 4050 Nitro V. Next up is The Last of Us. At 1080p ultra settings, the 4060 lock manages 62 FPS, which is 47% higher than the 6GB 4050 Nitro V, where this game at ultra settings was just unplayable due to 6GB VRAM buffer with only 1% loss of 11. Even at high settings, the 4060 lock was 36% faster at 83 FPS compared to the 4050 Nitro V at 61 FPS. The Last of Us is actually a super CPU demanding game, as you can see in this specific scene with CPU usage over 95%. So a more powerful CPU can potentially get you up to 10% more FPS. Alright, next up is A Plague Tale Requiem, which is a super graphically intensive game, and at 1080p ultra settings, the 4060 lock manages 50 FPS on average. Even with DLSS set to quality, the 4060 lock manages only 57 FPS, both of which are surprisingly only 25% and 12% faster than the 4050 Nitro V. I expected a bigger difference. Going one step down to high preset, the 4060 lock manages 61 FPS on average and 71 FPS with DLSS set to quality, both of which are now 33% faster and 20% faster than the Nitro V 4050 respectively, which is more in line as per our expectation. Alright, next game is Hogwarts Legacy, a very unoptimized and CPU bound game. At 1080p ultra settings, the 4060 lock manages 65 FPS. I don't have the numbers for ultra settings from the Nitro V 4050 because the 6GB VRAM. While at high settings, the 4060 lock manages 73 FPS on average, which is only 6% faster than the 4050 Nitro V, which is because of the CPU bound nature of this game. From what I've seen from desktop benchmarks as well, even super high-end CPUs struggle to eke out higher FPS in this game. It is a great game but flawed performance. DLSS is completely unnecessary in this game as it only makes the game more CPU bound, but this game is a good example to try out frame generation as that helps reduce CPU bound nature of this game and also makes the game more stable. Next game is Alan Wake 2, a super GPU heavy game, and this is the game where is the biggest difference between a 4060 and a 4050. At 1080p native using high preset, the 4060 lock manages only 47 FPS. This preset was not even running properly on the 6GB RTX 4050. At medium preset, the 4060 lock manages just 50 FPS, which is 47% faster than the 4050 Nitro V. At low preset, the 4060 lock manages just 60 FPS on average, which is 42% faster than the Nitro V 4050. This is a game where you absolutely need to use DLSS upscaling to get close to 60 FPS. Moving on, we have Horizon Zero Dawn. At 1080p ultimate quality, the 4060 manages 115 FPS on average, which is 29% faster than the 4050. And at favor quality preset, the 4060 lock manages 125 FPS, which is 23% faster than the 4050 Nitro V. Okay, so I have also included Horizon Forbidden West, but I haven't played it at all, but still wanted to show you. This game is absolutely gorgeous to look at, and at 1080p maximum settings, no DLSS, the 4060 lock in the opening section manages 63 FPS on average. Finally, we got Ghost of Tsushima at 1080p, very high setting, no DLSS, the 4060 lock manages a good 73 FPS on average, while on high settings, no DLSS, the 4060 lock manages 84 FPS on average. Okay, so that finally brings an end to the GPU performance benchmarks or gaming benchmarks. So let me know what you think about its performance. Remember, I recorded all these benchmarks with the 170 watt power adapter. In my opinion, under 80,000 rupees or under 75,000 rupees, this is truly excellent value and easily at least 20% better than the best RTX 4050 laptop that you can buy. Now, will a faster CPU like something like a 6P core CPU like the Intel Core i7-12700H or 12650H or even the i5-13450HX, provide you with better performance? Sure, of course it will do. But by how much? Maximum 10% in a couple of games here and there. And also, how much are you willing to spend extra to get that performance? Like, frankly speaking, in my opinion, it is not worth spending extra 10,000 rupees to get that little bit performance extra in a couple of games here and there. So if your goal is to save money and get a full powered RTX 4060 laptop with a pretty good CPU that doesn't hinder its performance too much, and you want to get it at as low of a cost as possible, then this Lenovo LOQ with the i5-12450HX and the RTX 4060 is a great choice. This laptop provides killer value for money, killer price to performance. Alright guys, so more videos to come, like for example undervolting tutorial and also performance with 230 watt power adapter, so stay tuned for that. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Like I said earlier, this is not a sponsored channel. All my reviews are done with complete independence. I purchased these laptops with my own money, and that is not an easy thing to do for a small channel like this. So please consider supporting the channel by purchasing your preferred laptops from the affiliate links down in the description. When you purchase from those links, I get a small commission without any extra cost to you, and that's what keeps this channel alive. For further interaction, also please consider joining our Telegram community, link in the description, and also get alerted on the best tech deals the earliest. With that said guys, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.